Have you ever worried that if you start your podcast and you don't continue it, that you're going to be embarrassed, that you're going to look like a fool in front of your listeners, in front of your family, in front of anybody that knows you had a podcast? Well, don't worry about that. That's what we're covering in today's video.
This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
What's up? Producer Jonathan here from The Podcast Factory. Glad you're here watching this video. And what we're going to talk about today is near and dear to my heart because I've done it before. You start a show, you put out a bunch of content, you start getting burnt out because you're not getting a return on your investment, and before you know it, the show crashes and burns. There's this phenomenon in podcasting. It's called pod fade. And here's how it works. It usually happens right around the 10 podcast mark, 10 shows, 10 episodes. And what happens is people are recording shows and they're really gung-ho in the beginning. And as they keep going, they realize how much work it really is. And they start getting burnt out. And then they're no longer ahead. So they're recording a show on Tuesday that they're airing on Thursday. By next week, they don't even have a show. So they say, screw it. I'm going to skip it. Then they skip that week. Then they skip another week. And before you know it, your podcast has faded out because you weren't prepared. So the way that we avoid that at the Podcast Factory is super simple. We have something called Your Vault. What's the vault? I'm glad you asked. So before we launch a show, we make sure that we have a minimum of 2 months of content in the vault before we launch. 2 months? Is that overkill? Well, think about this. Your life gets a hold of you, things come up, you get your attention taken somewhere else, and before you know it, you're behind and your podcast fails. We don't do that at the Podcast Factory. So by having a vault, you have a 2-month runway to make sure that you never run out of content. And the cool part is, the way we set it up is that you have 2 months of content and you're recording every 4 to 6 weeks. So you're usually at least a month ahead. So you want to avoid your podcast crashing and burning. Build your vault and set regular recording schedules, and that way you'll always stay ahead of the game and your podcast will not crash and burn, will not be a victim of pod fade, because you're going to be ahead of the game. If you need help staying ahead of the game, making things easy, being consistent, then come check us out over at the Podcast Factory. That's what we do for all our hosts. And for more videos just like this one, subscribe to our channel, thepodcastfactory.com/YouTube. See you on the next one.
This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.